everyone, and welcome back to Lights Camera Reactions. So today we're gonna do a reaction to a video by Christina Randall, and it's called "Did the Roommates Change Their Story?" Bryan Kohberger. So I'm very interested in this case. I've been watching a lot about it lately. I had just watched the little docu-series on Amazon, and I've seen that they've been like releasing a lot of information lately. Really, in the last few days, they've been releasing video footage of the body cam footage from the police, and then interviewing the girls. What else have they been releasing? Footage and pictures of the crime scene, statements. Bryan has been coming out and complaining about being harassed in prison, which I really don't care, but there's just been a lot coming out, so we're gonna cover it. I am going to make this 2 videos because she did 2 separate videos on 2 different situations involving this case, so we're gonna check both of those out in the next couple days. But we're gonna start with video 1 today, and this is Christina Randall's video, and she is probably one of my favorite true crime YouTubers to watch. So let's check her out.
I promised in my last video, these WSU complaints that we're going to talk about today, I wasn't ready for. Let's just say that. And we knew before, like a few years ago, that Bryan allegedly had a bunch of complaints made on him at WSU. But since the Idaho State Police dropped all these new documents, I don't think anybody has been ready to see just how many complaints. Girls crying, teachers writing him up. I mean, it has been a lot. Before we get into the WSU complaints, let's talk about some of the other interesting parts that I read in these documents, like how some reports are saying that Bryan said Kaylee's name during the incident. In this new set of documents that were released, there is a statement that was given by Dylan that we have not seen before. This interview is partially redacted, but it appears that it was conducted on November 17th of 2022, and it seems like it was done at Dylan's family's home, which was in Boise, Idaho. Now, there is a 1-hour time difference between Boise and Moscow, so you'll see in some of Dylan's statements that she seems to get like the time confused because of that. In the interview, Dylan does confirm that she had been drinking that night, but she said that she hadn't used any substances. And we did talk about that in one of my previous videos as well. Then Dylan goes on to say that around 4 to 4:20 a.m., she thought she heard Kaylee singing and like playing music. Then she heard who she thought was Kaylee walking up the stairs. And then she said that she heard Kaylee say, "Someone's here." And she sounded frantic. She thought that it was Kaylee walking up the stairs with Murphy. And y'all know that Murphy is Kaylee's dog. But then she said that she heard who she thought was Kaylee run back downstairs and that Murphy was barking at this time. But then Dylan went on to say she wasn't exactly sure if this was really what she heard. She said that all of the girls wore Doc Martens, and that's what it sounded like the person who came down the stairs was wearing. So in my opinion, she's hearing like boom, 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 boom coming down the stairs. And then it seems like Bethany texts Dylan about hearing something that sounded like fireworks. So there's been a lot of debate or questions about fireworks. A lot of people are like, was it a up? Was it this? A friend of mine had a good theory that it was a lamp. You know, like when a lamp gets knocked over and that bulb explodes, it makes a loud popping noise, that's what it could have been. But nevertheless, Dylan said that the second time she opened her bedroom door to see what was going on, this is when she heard what she thought was Kaylee crying on the second floor in the bathroom. She said that that's when she heard a male voice. She said that she had never heard this male voice before, and it said, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." And again, Dylan said that at first she thought that she heard Kaylee crying on the second floor in the bathroom with the male who said that. But in this statement, Dylan clarifies that knowing what she knew at that point, it could not have been Kaylee, and she believed that it was probably Xana. So again, they interviewed Dylan and Bethany right after the incident happened, right when the police got there.
This whole story just has me a little confused of why they didn't reach out to someone sooner. I do know alcohol played a part, and I haven't seen her last video with this case that she's talking about. I did see some of the photos from the crime scene, and I did see that, you know, it looked like there was some substances being used in the home. I'm not sure whose room that was. It could have been Kaylee's. There obviously was some substances being used by the girls as well. Not like that should really matter in this situation, but maybe they just weren't all there during the situation, and maybe that's why I don't know, maybe that's why it happened the way it did, because she wasn't all there to call 911 and was confused, because it sounded like there was a bunch of noise going on in the house, and it's weird to me that she pretty much stayed in her room the whole time, even hearing all this, and not just like coming out of her room and checking. Even if she heard someone crying, I think it's weird to not come out and check on your roommates. You know, we're all best friends, we all live together, and I think it's weird that she didn't come check on her roommate. I mean, it is a good thing she didn't, because that's probably why she's still alive, but I do think that's a little weird. Let's continue and hear what else they released.
I want to play a part of that 911 phone call for you guys, just to remember the tone of what happened at the moment that they found out that their friends were gone, or something terrible had actually happened.
911 location of your emergency.
Hi, something is happening. Something's happening in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
And this interview that we just talked about was like a week later, or almost a week later. By this time, all of the things, this is what I'm imagining Dylan has gone through, okay? She had just turned 19 years old. She was the new person in this house with all these roommates that had been there together before. She's basically fresh out of high school. She had been drinking all night long, and we're going to talk more about that here in a second. And during the night, she's trying to reconcile with the things that she's hearing. But after she realizes what happens and she goes and stays with her parents, then all of those sounds that she probably excused away as a firecracker, as this, as that, she's starting to put more pieces together. Now, I found this interesting because then Dylan goes on to say that she never even thought about an intruder in her mind. She stated that she was not processing what was occurring as threatening. She was thinking a million other things. Dylan talks about seeing Brian as he was making his way out of the house, and she again says that he was holding something that she initially thought was a vacuum, but she knew that it didn't make any sense. So she thought maybe that the person was a firefighter because of what Bethany had texted her about hearing a firework. So maybe she's thinking like, okay, I heard this loud sound. It's a pop. I saw this guy. He was a firefighter checking throughout the house. I'm underage. I've been drinking. I'm hiding in the room. They'll just come in and check the house and leave, and everything is fine. Everybody's passed out. Dylan then went on to say that she left her bedroom. Again, we all knew this. She ran to Bethany's room, and she said that she actually saw Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom in her underwear. Now, Dylan said that she thought Xana must have been passed out, and that it actually was not unusual for Xana to be in her underwear. And then Dylan went on to say that, again, she didn't perceive this guy, Brian, as necessarily a threat because there were people that were always coming in and out of the house all the time. And again, Mike.
So I didn't know that she was new in the home. So that kind of makes a little bit of sense too, that she just started living there. I wasn't aware of that fact, or the fact that she just turned 19. So maybe she did overdrink and she was a little scared to get in trouble for drinking. I'm not really sure if that's the case, but I do think it's strange that she said that she saw Xana laying on the floor and that she didn't see some maybe, you know, blood, or even go see if Xana was okay, even if she thought she was like passed out on the floor. I don't know. It's just a little strange to me that she saw her on the floor and she thought that was normal. and then that she went to the other roommate, and that at that time that they still didn't call for help or the police or even just go check. I think that's strange. I really do. I can't get over it. I don't know how I would act in this situation because you never know till you're there. But I just think it's weird that she didn't check if she saw her on the floor.
Y'all, this is on November 17th. This is not her making up these reasonings after the internet has painted her as a bad guy. At this point, nobody even knew all these details. This is her reconciling in her mind and going, okay, well, I didn't think that this guy that was dressed in all black was a threat. We always got people coming in and out of the house. And we've talked about this many times here on this channel. And it's not like Brian came at her aggressively or anything. He just simply walked past her. But the part I kept seeing reports about is how Brian supposedly said Kaylee's name during the incident. Well, that's not really the case, because further down in these documents, the lead crime scene investigator is giving his summary of what he was told happened, and he mentions that Dylan heard a male say, "It's okay, Kaylee, I'm here for you." So in my opinion, this comes off more as a game of telephone. This isn't a direct statement from Dylan. And I think that that's important when you're reading some of these statements too, that these officers are just writing down the highlights of what a person is saying. So if everything doesn't quite make sense, sometimes it's on the person that's taking the notes' fault too, you know? Okay, so now let's talk about the WSU complaints against Brian, and buckle up because there is a lot. Now, again, these reports are redacted, so I have to do a bit of assuming, but it looks like this first one was with someone who said that Brian was their student and that they had met several times to discuss requirements for his doctorate studies. So it seems like this is someone that was over him, possibly a professor or an administrator. They described Brian as socially awkward, and they said that Brian was removed from a redacted area because of his rudeness and unprofessional behavior towards other students and college professors. Now, I would have to assume that this is saying that he was removed from his TA position. The next interview is also with someone employed at WSU, and her job required that she discuss course options with students and any issues that they may have with other students or faculty members. She said that she regularly interacted with Brian and that her interactions were they were pretty ordinary, nothing like out of the blue. She said that she would strike up conversations about hiking in the local area, but as the weeks went on, she said that Brian would hang out in the hallways, and she said that he would hang around her office, and she described him as creepy. She said that he would simply just stand at her desk and stare at her, or just stare at her coworker, and at one point he even blocked the coworker in her desk area. She said that Brian would also follow them out to their cars at the end of the day.
Wow.
And you might think, okay, maybe
That's crazy. Just quick side note, even just looking at his picture creeps me out. I feel like he's got those eyes that these unalivers have. But that's also a red flag right there. He obviously was stalking her and had some obsession with her, and probably was upset that she wasn't giving him the attention that he wanted. I had watched another video previously where they talked about he was in a bunch of those women hate groups. I don't know the word for it, but where he pretty much hated women and blamed them for everything that's wrong with his life. Apparently he was in a few groups on Facebook and other sites, and pretty much always bashing women and saying how much he hates them and all these things that he would want to do to them, things like that. So this is kind of also leading down that path that he obviously did this, and he obviously had a problem with women. But I'm still really curious how he picked Kaylee and how he picked that house. I'm so curious on why her and her roommates. But let's continue and see. I'm really curious if we'll ever find that answer out. I'm sure he's never going to tell anyone because he obviously seems very narcissistic, and he doesn't have the need or feel to say anything or comment on his crime. But I really hope one day we find out how he found them and what led him to them.
Awkward. Maybe he's just like wanting a friend, and he's like latching on, and he's not realizing like what he's doing. But the behavior resulting in them arranging for someone to meet them when they got off of work to escort them to their cars. Like, this wasn't just like some socially awkward guy who, maybe the girls were friendly to him and he latched on to it. Like, they went and got somebody to walk them to their vehicles because they were concerned. She then went on to say that these complaints that she got about Brian referenced his rude and belittling behavior towards women and his unprofessional rude dealings with, and they redacted a name. She said that this resulted in a mandatory training class for all graduate students regarding behavior expectations. So imagine this.
Wow.
The way that he was treating people, especially women, and this is going to be a reoccurring theme here with Brian, was so bad that they had to do this whole class for all of these students. That is wild. She said that she received 9 total complaints against Brian. Just her received
crazy.
9. And then in a different report, a woman who was also a graduate student talked about her experience with Brian. And she said that in their conversation, Brian talked about how interested he was in how emotion played a role in how offenders make decisions. She said that they talked about the use of alcohol and substances, and she said that Brian said that he was not a drinker and he did not understand why people drank. I wonder if he told her about his alleged addiction. But then she said that Brian liked to dominate their conversations.
I didn't know that he had a alleged addiction. I didn't hear about that yet, but you can tell that he's very controlling, and that's crazy that how many complaints he had before he even committed these crimes against women. Like, he had a ton of complaints, and we're still going down that list of complaints and going over them. But it's strange to me that nothing had happened to him or charges weren't pressed on him or something, because he was down the road to doing something tragic to someone, whether it be or unaliving someone, which he obviously unalived 4 people, not just 1, 4. And I feel like all the signs were there. I really do. I just wonder how his parents feel. Like, I'm sure they had to know. If people that just went to school with him and his teachers, and college, you're not even really friends with everyone. You're just in class with people. You don't really associate with them like that. If even classmates were talking about him, like how strange he was, and they could see that he hated women. I know his parents did. Like, I just wonder about how him and his mother's relationship, and he had sisters. So I don't know. It makes me wonder where all this comes from, like where his hate came from. Like, did it come from like him just not being able to get girls, like girlfriends or anything like that, or being able to make a connection with a woman? Or is it deeper? Like, did it come from his mom? Was there some, something that happened to him when he was younger that scarred him and made him this emotionless being and hate women the way he did? I don't know. There's so many questions, and I feel like we'll never get the answers to all of them. But let's hear some more about these complaints.
She said that he would stand in doorways and hover over her, and that he had this like macho demeanor about him, and he would appear to be like all puffed up. She said the only thing that felt off to her about Brian was his intense stare. She said that he would intensely stare at people even when he wasn't having a conversation with them. She also said that she was aware of an issue that Brian had with, and there's a name that's redacted, and I'm thinking that this was maybe another student. And she said that Brian was perceived by female classmates as dominant and disrespectful to female instructors. At one point, this person had come into this woman's office crying because of a classroom discussion that Brian was having with her. She said that his behavior could be described as possibly like sexist and that he really did not like to be interrupted. She said that Brian seemed very uptight and serious and that he wanted to come off as intelligent. She also remembers one other staff member pulling her aside to tell her about a possible issue with Brian stalking another member of the staff. Yeah, not just a student, y'all, the staff. An incident took place where he asked the other staff member and had followed that person outside to their car. This person, given all this information to investigators, then went on to say that in hindsight, she believed that the happened possibly because Brian had been rejected by someone. So see, these interviews were given way back in 2023.
Wow.
So it's like the incel stuff. I'm still, unless there was some sort of thing that I am convinced that this is somebody that had psychopathic tendencies and controlled them in whatever way for however long, and then got into the criminology and began to obsess over stuff, hyper focus, if you will, and started to get an inflated sense of self, all those pictures of himself, along with him over talking people, feeling like he's the smartest one in the room, along with him getting pulled over by the police and wanting to let the police that he basically knew more about the law than they did, and all of this stuff, and then began to convince himself he could commit the perfect crime and be better than all the ones that got caught. Anyways, this next one is also very interesting because this woman actually contacted the Moscow tip line to report that she had observed Brian with bloody knuckles just prior to the incident in Moscow. She too was a graduate student, and she said that she did not like Brian because he would constantly talk during one of their classes. She said that he would actually pick fights with other classmates, and she even described an argument where someone left their class upset because of Brian. She then went on to talk about how one time after class, her and Brian were completely alone. And she said that she was trying to leave the classroom, but Brian blocked the exit. She said that Brian then said that they should meet up sometime and talk about their professional career. Imagine that, y'all. Imagine this guy being a rude butthead to everybody at all times, thinking he's all that in the classroom, over talking other people, disrespecting the female professors. And then it's just them two in the classroom, and he's sitting in there, and she gets all her stuff and gets ready to leave, and he blocks the door, leans up against it and says, "Hey, we ought to hang out. We ought to talk about our professional careers." Like, hello, I don't think so. Yeah, maybe sometime, Brian, like squeeze. I mean, gosh, poor girl. Anyways,
It's so crazy to me that all this happened before he did what he did and nothing had ever transpired with him, like no restraining orders or nothing like that. It sounds like he harassed all the women, like, and all these are just from teachers. These aren't even from students. So this is crazy that, you know, this was being done. And like I said, this stuff is before, like all this stuff was turned in before he even committed this crime. It's not like he committed this crime and then all these people came out and started saying this. No, these were documentations before he committed these crimes. Let's listen to this one.
Brian's appearance changed after the incident in Moscow. And I think this is very interesting because she said that he would normally come in and be all clean shaven and neatly dressed. But after the incident, he would come to class with like facial hair and his dress would be all disheveled. And she said that he also started wearing a thick blue coat that he never took off during their 3-hour-long class, even when the weather didn't call for a thick coat like that. She then said that Brian always engaged in classroom discussions, but when the Moscow incident came up, she said that Brian did not participate. Her and other classmates were even tracking how often Brian would arrive late to class with female professors versus male professors.
Wow.
They say that he was always late to class
Even
with
did that.
female
That's
professors,
that.
but not the male professors. They literally kept a tally of it. Like they This is not seemingly a situation where a guy that's in a position of some sort of power at the school gets into an argument with a female and everybody's saying, oh, he's sexist, he's sexist. These people are actually tallying and like watching this. This is a man who thought that he could dominate everybody, but especially women. And probably from the rejection that he got from the types of women that he wanted, the incel factor. In a different interview, another classmate said that she actually asked Brian about his bloody knuckles in October, and he said that he had been boxing and that's why his hand was injured. I just see him like trying to talk to somebody, a girl, and then him being in his apartment late at nighttime and listening to music, like punching things, like, I don't know. I just don't see him like at a boxing class. I think we would have heard from this boxing class person by now, but maybe not. Nevertheless, this woman also said that Brian seemed to be in support of the DP at the time and even made statements that the victims' families should have a say as to whether or not the DP is given, which is very interesting. But when I tell you guys that I could go on and on, there are probably at least 100 pages of complaints against Brian in this document drop. And it's a lot of the same stuff, like him arguing with other students and professors and essentially everyone around him, especially the females. And one person even talked about overhearing Brian shouting at a male professor, and they said how unusual it was because Brian typically only argued with female professors. This person said that the argument led to the professor asking Brian to leave, but that Brian wouldn't. He actually refused to leave. So the professor had to leave his own office to get away from Brian.
That's crazy.
Can you imagine? There's even one complaint that says that a grad student came running into his professor's office upset because she said that Brian would not work with her because she was disabled and gay. Yeah, she said that Brian told her that he would need his partner to be physically perfect and a disability would just not be acceptable. The last one that I wanted to talk about is something that a professor predicted about Brian. And I want to say how eerie this is, but when you think about all this other stuff that was going on, I have a couple things.
I'm going to stop this real quick. We're going to get right back to it, but I wanted to say this before I forgot. I would assume that all these complaints and stuff is what got him kicked out, because I think if I recall correctly, they said that he got fired from his TA job right before this happened, and that I think they also said that he was getting kicked out of school. I'm not 100% sure on that last part, but I wouldn't be surprised with all this information.
Say, one, why did it take the college so long to get rid of him? Man, the red tape.
Exactly.
These types
That's
of
a good
things,
question.
You gotta go through all these protocols. When you have somebody that's causing this much of a problem, okay? Hello. But it's not surprising when you hear all of that. But nevertheless, when discussing Brian with her coworkers, she said that she remembered saying, he is smart enough that in 4 years we will have to give him a PhD. But mark my words, I work with preppers. If we give him a PhD, that's the guy that when he's a professor, we will hear of his harassing, stalking, and essaying of his students. Whoa.
Wow.
This is what the teachers are talking about in the break room, basically, you guys. Whoa. The same professor said that Brian was so problematic as a TA that they considered cutting his funding to get him out of the program. And this had never happened before at WSU. And this conversation about Brian happened during Christmas break. So clearly it seems like things were coming to a head for Brian during that fall of 2022. And the complaints against him were mounding up. And he had several disciplinary meetings with the faculty. Then he commits the incident in Moscow, and things got worse from there. He stopped going to class as much, but when he did go, he looked all disheveled. He wasn't participating at all in the discussions about the Moscow case. And then he's at home meticulously cleaning his car, Googling the case and himself constantly, and even Googling how to get rid of his car, and so on and so on. These complaints started coming in just days into Brian's first semester of the program that he was in. And by the end of that semester, there was 13 total. That is in just 3 months, a semester, not a year, not a 4-year degree, in 3 months. And I have to say, you guys, we all interact with somebody that's rude, right? Sometimes on a daily basis. Maybe somebody's having a bad day, whatever. For people to actually go and file complaints, maybe you have one person that's super sensitive and will just rush down there and file a complaint any old time. But this many different people, staff members, professors, administration, students, all literally filing complaints about this guy.
Yeah, that's wild.
Whatever he did, it had to be done multiple times. Nobody's going to file a complaint the first time you have an argument with somebody, okay? It had to be bad. And the whole school's sitting around going like, we cut his funding? Like, well, how are we going to get, how do we get him out of here? What do we do? Wow. So my question to you all is, do you think that this was just like the beginning of a spree for Brian? Some of y'all, I've seen in the comment section, think that this was not his first situation. What if he hadn't been caught, though? What do you think? Do you think he would have went for more? I definitely do. I think that when they got Brian off the streets, they saved lives.
I agree.
For sure. Because he, again, thought he was smarter than anybody, and he was going to go back at it again.
I agree. 100%.
Let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below.
I don't know, guys. That is crazy. I know that the title of this was called "Did the Roommates Change Their Story?" Obviously, there wasn't much on that situation. I don't think they changed their story. It sounds pretty legit from what we heard. Of course, they didn't go completely into it, but it doesn't really sound like they changed their story. I think they were scared. And they were young and probably just not, like, when you're that age, you're not thinking anything bad's going on. You don't, like, so especially when you're drinking alcohol. She's just probably in la la land, and I hate that, but at the same time, it could have been what saved her life as well, not going out there and seeing what was going on, because that, like I said, that could have cost her life. I wish she would have just called 911 when she heard the noises, but you know how it is when you're in college, especially when you have college roommates. You're gonna probably hear all types of stuff, and it's probably not even the first time. Like they said, there's people in and out the house all the time, so I do try to understand why she didn't call 911, and I do try to understand why she didn't think anything bad was going on. I do my best to try to understand that, and I do to an extent. Now, all these complaints is insane, like that he had all these complaints. Like, it's just so insane. It's because it's like all the red flags were there. Everybody already just had this feeling, and then to see this man who was a constant and had the same repetitious behavior, to see after these unalivings happen and he now no longer has those same repetitious movements. He's different. He looks different. He's not acting the same. He's got bloody knuckles. All of those things just show that he obviously did this. And I'm only stating this because there are people out there that don't believe he did this, and there's people out there that believe that it was more than one person who did this, but that's obviously not the case. She only saw one person. She only heard one person. Yes, he took 4 lives. Most of them were probably sleeping at the time and were startled and unalive, especially the 2 girls upstairs. I think that they were still asleep when he did it to them, and when he got downstairs, I don't know exactly what happened. I don't think we ever will, because like I said, I don't think he's ever going to speak out about what he did. I honestly don't, especially not to a woman. Maybe a man, one of these, how they go and they talk to the prisoners and get interviews. Maybe a man would be able to, but he's definitely not going to give no woman the interview, but I don't think he's ever going to talk about it, to be honest. Another thing, I do think that they saved lives arresting him. If he wasn't caught, he would have done it again. I 100% guarantee he would have. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, I am going to react to another one that she just released yesterday. So I'm gonna react to that one, and I'm gonna drop that one too in the next day or two, and we'll see what that goes over. I'm very interested into hearing and seeing all the new stuff. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys next time.